The gunshot tore past my cheek before I even understood she'd pulled the trigger. Claire Danvers, our HOA president, stood in my driveway, shaking the M&P shield locked on my chest like she was delivering a sentence. My ranch hand, Luis, who'd worked with me since day one, froze behind my truck, whispering to 911. Neighbors didn't dare move, but something else did. Boulder, my 280-pound ram, lowered his head and charged, locking onto Claire like she was a wolf threatening the flock. She never even saw him coming. And what happened next didn't just save my life. It exposed the one secret she thought no one would ever uncover. I didn't meet Claire Danvers during a gunfight. I met her 3 months earlier, the morning she stormed onto my land like she already owned the deed. My crew had barely set the first cedar panels when she crossed my property line without slowing down. Her first action wasn't a greeting, it was a barked order. Stop this construction immediately. She didn't wait for an explanation. She snapped photos, measured the posts with the precision of someone looking for a reason to punish, and waved Luis away like he was trespassing on my own ranch. Boulder, my 280-pound ram, stood behind me in the pasture, watching her, with the same unimpressed glare he saved for coyotes. Claire noticed him too. "Get that animal restrained," she snapped, as if Boulder was part of the violation. I kept my tone even. Per Silver Canyon bylaws, fencing up to 8 feet is allowed. Mine's 7. Her jaw twitched. "That rule will be corrected at the next meeting. It's still the rule today." Something in her face tightened, an expression I'd later recognize as the moment she decided I was a problem she needed to eliminate. She gave her single motivation in one clipped sentence: "I keep this community in order." Then she marched the fence line, documenting every inch, building a case that didn't exist yet. That was challenge number 1. Number 2 came when my fence was vandalized. Number 3 arrived, wearing fake inspection badges. By the time she pointed a gun at me this morning, it was clear Claire wasn't fighting a fence. She was fighting the truth she was terrified I'd uncover. The harassment began the very next morning. A bright yellow notice hung from my gate. Preliminary violation, unapproved materials. Another sat under my door, time-stamped at 613A, accusing me of creating visual disharmony. Claire's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp letters, angry punctuation. 2 hours later, a second slip appeared, this one taped directly to a fence post I hadn't even stained yet. Claire had signed it in bold red ink, like a judge stamping a sentence. Luis found her SUV, idling across the road, engine running, camera pointed at my property. She drove off the second he waved. I work remotely from my barn office, so I saw exactly how often she circled 3 times before noon, twice more before sunset. Boulder watched her each time, head tilted the way he studied predators. None of the notices cited an actual rule. None referenced any section number. They were just warnings meant to rattle me. And they did. Not because of what they said, but because it was obvious she'd only just begun. 2 days later, Claire escalated. Luis and I were anchoring the corner posts when she marched straight across my property line again. No call, no permission, no hesitation. She walked directly into my workspace, as if the ground belonged to her. "Step aside," she ordered, extending a tape measure and jotting down numbers like she was documenting a crime scene. "This entire structure requires emergency review." She wasn't alone. Nolan Briggs stood on the gravel shoulder, scribbling furiously in his little black notebook, eyes locked on every move we made. He didn't ask questions, didn't speak, just documented like he was building a private archive. Claire took photos of my screws, my lumber, even the power tools. "This stain isn't on the approved list," she declared. "It's a natural oil, Claire. The bylaws don't regulate stain shades. They do now." The sentence wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Something about the timing, the speed, the rehearsed aggression woke up my old software engineer instincts. At my last company, I tracked patterns for a living, and Claire's pattern felt engineered, not emotional. She wasn't reacting to my fence. She was executing a plan. The first real hit came before dawn. A jagged spray of black paint stretched 20 feet across my cedar panels, jarring angry words that looked rushed but intentional. "Tear it down." The letters dripped onto the soil like a threat left to fester. Luis found the can tossed near the ditch. I checked my cameras, grainy footage of a dark blue BMW X5 creeping past at 311A. Plate partially visible, window cracked open. No hand holding a can, but the timing wasn't a coincidence. Boulder stood beside me the entire time I reviewed the footage, pressing his forehead gently into my arm. Even he could sense tension humming through the ranch. 3 hours later, a white utility van rolled up. 2 men in official-looking jackets stepped out carrying clipboards. "Environmental compliance check," the taller one said. "We've received reports of improper livestock waste management." From whom, I asked. confidential. Their badges looked printed, their paperwork looked pixelated, and their questions focused suspiciously on my east property line, not the sheep pen. After a full hour of probing, photographing, and pretending to test soil, they handed me a citation threatening multi-thousand-dollar fines within 48 hours. Luis watched them leave jaw tight. That shorter one, he said, quietly works for Claire's cousin. Before I could process that, I noticed a new problem. The east gate latch had been tampered with, sabotaged, and Boulder was already wandering dangerously close to it. By noon, I was sitting in Sheriff Mark Harlan's cramped office, scrolling through camera footage on my phone while he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I see the SUV," he said. "I see the timing, but no clear shot of anyone holding the can." "What about the inspectors?" I asked, sliding him the fake forms. He frowned. "This letterhead isn't county standard. And this signature, this belongs to a man who retired 4 years ago. So, report them. I will. But Claire's persuasive. Last year, she convinced the town council to shut down a parade route because the music disturbed the community energy." He wasn't dismissing me, he was warning me. Outside, as I stepped off the porch, a new envelope sat wedged under my wiper. Notice of non-compliance, immediate hearing required. Signed by Claire, stamped by Nolan. She wasn't waiting for evidence. She was building momentum. For the first time, a tight pressure settled in my chest. Not fear, but something colder. At my old job, the worst conflicts stayed behind screens. Here they stood on my driveway with clipboards and guns. That night I installed additional cameras along the east fence. Luis helped until nearly midnight, the two of us working under the sweep of a floodlight, while Boulder patrolled the perimeter like he sensed what was coming. At 1:47 a.m., a car engine rumbled outside. I checked the monitors. The same BMW X5 idled at the end of my driveway, headlights off. Someone stepped out, just a silhouette, and shone a flashlight across my posts, tracing the fence like they were measuring access points. When I opened the barn door, the figure bolted. The SUV fishtailed onto the road and vanished into the dark. By sunrise, I'd printed the plates, timestamps, and footage for the next HOA meeting. But Claire beat me to the door. She pounded so hard it rattled the frame. When I opened it, she shoved a stack of printed damage estimates at my chest. Claims about her trampled rose garden, shattered fountain, and trauma inflicted by uncontrolled livestock. Boulder had knocked over her decorative fountain the night someone tampered with my gate. She didn't mention the tampering. "You'll pay every cent," she hissed. I held up my own folder gate photos, inspector footage, BMW timestamps. Her expression flickered. Fear, recognition, something deeper. "You've been busy," she whispered. "Just documenting," I replied. That pushed her over the edge. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "People like you ruin neighborhoods." And then her hand dipped into her purse. The silver glint of a M&P shield appeared, and the world funneled into a single narrow moment. Her finger rested on the trigger. Luis whispered, "Ethan, don't move." Boulder lifted his head from the pasture. Claire's breathing quickened, and as the sunlight hit the gun's slide, I knew she wasn't trying to scare me anymore. She was silencing me. Claire's scream echoed across my driveway as she leveled the M&P shield at my chest, both hands shaking so hard the barrel wobbled. Luis stood a few yards behind me, quietly relaying every detail to the dispatcher voice, taut but steady. "Put the gun down, Claire," I said carefully. "You don't want to do this." "Oh, I absolutely do," she snapped, eyes wild. "You think you can stroll in here, build whatever you want, challenge my authority, and walk away? Not in Silver Canyon. Not ever." Neighbors gathered at the end of the driveway, whispering, filming frozen. My fence, the very thing she'd tried to destroy, cast long shadows over all of us as the sun rose behind it. Boulder stood near the pasture gate, locked on the danger muscles coiled, reading her body language better than any human. Claire's rant spiraled. "You're poisoning this community, violating standards, undermining everything I built." Her finger twitched dangerously close to the trigger. Luis tried stepping forward. "Ma'am, the sheriff is on the way. Stay back," she shouted, swinging the gun toward him for a fraction of a second before snapping it back to me. Tears streaked her cheeks, mascara smearing into chaotic lines. "You should have just torn the fence down," she said, voice cracking. "But now you've forced my hand." And in that moment, before the gunshot, before the impact, before everything unraveled, I saw something in her eyes, not just anger. Fear. Fear of what I'd uncovered. Fear of what she was about to lose. The instant after Boulder sent her flying into the horse trough, his massive horns catching her clean in the ribs, the pistol skidded across the dirt, and Luis kicked it aside. Neighbors gasped as Claire surfaced from the murky water, sputtering hair plastered to her face, red blazer now a soggy shade of mud. That was the moment Sheriff Mark Harlan's cruiser screeched to a stop. He took one look at Claire dripping in algae, the scattered gravel from Boulder's impact, the thrown pistol, and then at the crowd of witnesses. "Everyone stay right where you are," he said, voice firm. I pulled up the footage from my phone. My cameras had captured everything, including Claire drawing the weapon. "Sheriff," I said, handing him the screen. "This wasn't self-defense. She came to my door armed." Harlan watched the clip twice, jaw tightening. Then he pointed at the two deputies arriving behind him. "Secure the weapon, and get Miss Danvers out of that trough," Claire screamed, as deputies hauled her up. "This is a conspiracy. He set me up. He trained that animal to attack me," Louise snorted. "Lady Boulder just saved a man from getting shot." Sheriff Harlan turned to Nolan Briggs, who'd been hovering at the driveway's edge, gripping his notebook like a lifeline. "Mr. Briggs, I'll need your notes from today." Nolan blanched. I have nothing to do with this." But several neighbors stepped forward. "I saw him taking pictures at 3 a.m., one said. "He was with those inspectors," another added. A deputy collected Nolan's notebook. Inside were sketches of my property, timestamps of the night visits, lists of homeowners Claire had handled. But the kicker was a folder tucked behind the back cover bank transfers labeled Summit Crest Holdings. Sheriff Harlan exhaled through his nose. This just went from a domestic incident to a criminal investigation. While deputies handcuffed Claire, still dripping, still raging, another cruiser rolled up. A woman in tactical black and a windbreaker stepped out, flashing a badge before anyone could ask. "Special Agent Jenna Ruiz, FBI." The entire driveway fell silent. She walked straight to Sheriff Harlan. "We received your alert about irregular HOA funds. And we've been tracking Summit Crest Holdings for months. Mr. Mercer," she turned to me, "you may have just given us the final puzzle piece." Claire froze mid-scream. "What, you can't be serious." Agent Ruiz didn't even look at her. She held up Nolan's confiscated notebook, flipping to the back. Transfers, maps, survey stakes, projected access routes for heavy equipment, all converging on your property line, Mr. Mercer. Ironcrest Resources is behind it, and Claire here was their point of pressure. Nolan broke first. I didn't do anything. Claire told me it was legal. She said it was community planning." Ruiz raised a brow. "Funny. The emails we just pulled from your phone say otherwise." She showed him a screen. He nearly collapsed. Claire erupted again. "You think I did this alone? They promised me protection. They said, her voice cracked. It wasn't anger now. It was realization. The people she trusted weren't coming." Ruiz signaled deputies. "Transport both defendants to county holding. They'll be transferred to federal custody by evening." As Claire was guided toward the cruiser, she twisted back toward me, eyes full of something between hatred and terror. "You ruined everything," she whispered. I shook my head. "You did that yourself." The door slammed shut. Boulder wandered up beside me, nudging my shoulder like nothing unusual had happened. Horns still dusted from the impact, eyes calm. The crowd neighbors who had once been scared to speak broke into applause. Someone laughed through their tears. Someone else hugged Luis. A few people walked right up to Boulder and patted his woolly head like he was the sheriff. And, for the first time since moving to Silver Canyon Estates, I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was our community's turning point. And the truth Claire tried to bury had finally broken the surface. The flashing lights washed across my driveway, painting the cedar fence in red and blue as deputies loaded Claire and Nolan into separate cruisers. The dust from the struggle still hung in the air, settling slowly over the crowd of neighbors who hadn't left, not because they needed to stay, but because they wanted to see how the nightmare ended. People began moving toward me in small, hesitant steps, like they weren't sure whether to cheer, cry, or apologize for staying silent so long. Mrs. Hartley, who lived 2 houses down, wrapped an arm around herself before speaking. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. We all saw things. We just didn't know how far she'd go." "You spoke today," I said softly. "That matters." Luis let out a slow exhale beside me, wiping sweat from his forehead. The man had stared down a gun, a corrupt HOA, and a conspiracy, yet he still looked more worried about Boulder, who was now sniffing at a deputy's boots as if evaluating him. People gathered around the ram like he was the true sheriff of Silver Canyon Estates. Someone joked, "We should elect Boulder as HOA president," and the laughter that followed was the first genuine sound of relief this neighborhood had made in years. The tension that once shadowed every driveway, every HOA notice, every whispered rumor, it began to lift right there on the gravel of my ranch. And for the first time, I saw not just fear in my neighbors' faces, but unity. Special Agent Jenna Ruiz remained in my driveway, flipping through the confiscated documents under the beam of a deputy's flashlight. She didn't need an office or a courtroom. She worked right where the truth had broken open. "We've suspected Ironcrest for months," she said, tapping one of Nolan's sketches. "Blowing up property values through HOA, pressure-forcing sales, acquiring mineral rights for pennies." "And Claire?" I asked. Ruiz closed the notebook. "She helped them because they offered her influence. Someone like her, power is the currency." Deputies emerged from Claire's SUV with boxes of HOA files, forms she never showed, the community letters she never mailed legally, and an entire envelope of receipts tied to Summit Crest Holdings. Ruiz nodded to her team. "Photograph everything. The federal warrant is inbound. This entire operation is now a federal scene." A few neighbors gasped, realizing the scale of the corruption, how close they came to losing their homes. "Mr. Mercer," Ruiz said, turning back to me, "your documentation cameras, timestamps, they're clean, consistent, and thorough. Without them, this doesn't crack open tonight." Luis elbowed me lightly. "See, boss, all that computer work paid off." I almost laughed. If my past life built algorithms, this one sure knew how to break them. Standing in the glow of floodlights, I watched deputies tag evidence, while Ruiz coordinated arrests that would ripple far beyond our neighborhood. Silver Canyon Estates wasn't just free from an HOA tyrant, it was now the center of a federal takedown. When the last cruiser finally rolled away, the crowd didn't disperse. They drifted closer, neighbors who had once avoided eye contact, now stepping into the open like people waking from a long sleep. Walter, the retired mechanic, placed a hand on my shoulder. "Son, we're done being pushed around. Whatever comes next, we build it together." Around us, people nodded. No committees, no fear, no Claire. Someone walked forward carrying a stack of old HOA violation slips paper that had ruled this place with quiet tyranny. He dropped the whole pile into the rusty burn barrel next to my barn. A match struck. Flames curled upward, soft and bright, and everyone watched the papers curl into ash. Boulder wandered over, sniffing at the smoke before leaning his heavy weight against my side. Luis chuckled. "He knows he won." "No," I said, scratching behind Boulder's horn. "We did." The chatter grew into something warm, talk of rebuilding trust, rewriting bylaws with fairness, maybe dissolving parts of the HOA entirely. For the first time, these weren't whispers behind doors. They were spoken proudly in the open air of a ranch finally free. As the last embers faded, I looked over my land, my fence standing tall, my neighbors standing taller. Claire thought order came from control. Turns out order came from people choosing each other over fear. And as Boulder nudged me toward the house, I realized something simple, something grounding. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes, it comes with wool momentum and two perfectly curved horns.